Good morning. My name is Julia Chain, Program Manager with the South Mountain Partnership. Thank you so much for joining us today on this recording. We're going to be going over our mini grant program updates for 2026 and share information and tips to help you apply in 2026. We'll also be talking briefly about who we are at the South Mountain Partnership. So without further ado, let me get started. I do want to let you know just a little bit of housekeeping. Many of the links that I mentioned today will be available in the recording description. The South Mountain Partnership is one of 8 Pennsylvania conservation landscapes. Conservation landscapes are designated by DCNR and operate as a public-private partnership between DCNR and nonprofit agencies. For us, that's the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Each of these conservation landscapes are unique and different, but what is the same about all of them is they combine key natural assets, public land, committed partners, and a resource that is worth saving. So we're really excited to work with all of you here in the South Mountain region. As the South Mountain Partnership, we fill an interesting role. We call ourselves a conservation network, meaning that we operate as a group of over 60 partners. We have more than 30 committee members. So this is a grassroots effort to help guide conservation effort in our region. We often show up as a convener, a facilitator. You may have attended one of our regional meetings before. But the thing that we're going to be talking about today is how we bring funding to the region. And there's a reason that we want to bring funding to the region. We know that we have great partners that are working, and we want to make sure to be able to support them. We have a State of the Region research project, and we want to advance the goals that were made for our region within that project. We also want to improve the health of our region and the quality of life for all of the people that call this place home. We want to support land managers, students, and we want to be able to meet people where they're at and provide funds when others aren't available. And we want to be flexible and support grassroots initiatives. We know that this investment in our future is going to have ripple effects for years to come. We've been providing this funding for quite a while. We started our mini grant program in 2009, and as you can see, we've been awarded an impressive amount of funds into the region. And I just want to note how large that average leverage is, at $2.50 being leveraged for each dollar invested, meaning you guys are doing so much more with the investment that we're making in our partners. However, there's also always opportunity to continue to grow and change our program. So our mini grant is received a little bit of a facelift courtesy of our program committee this year. And I'll be telling you a little bit about those changes. And I wanted to start with some of the updates. So there's a new name. We're calling these grants Community Impact Grants. They are still our mini grant program. There are not any major changes to the way that we're managing this program, but we wanted a name that better described the impact that these programs have in our region. We also have a really exciting change that we have a lowered match guidelines. This is thanks to changes in DCNR's funding and process. We re-grant these funds through a DCNR C2P2 grant, and through their change, we were able to offer a lower match. So we'll be talking more about that later and exactly how that math works. We've also updated our total project cost, meaning the entire project that you're applying for cannot be more than $50,000. Again, we'll be going into the math a little bit later. Our program committee also worked to streamline our final application. We've made the questions more direct, focused, with shorter word counts so that we could really get to the heart and the meaning of your project. The funding for this program, as I mentioned, comes through Pennsylvania DCNR through their C2P2 program and the Environmental Stewardship Fund. We apply for these funds on a yearly basis. The re-granting of these projects is something that we're really proud of, and we're happy to bring these funds into our community. The timeline for our grant program work would begin in September 2026 and would have to conclude by December 2027. So we have a little bit more than a year for you to do your project. We have many types of projects are eligible. It's actually easier to talk about what's not eligible. Things that aren't eligible include acquisition, fundraising, and general operations. But outside of those projects, I encourage you to think creatively about conservation needs that you have and what types of projects would meet your needs. Happy to talk through our eligibility process, and we offer a streamlined pre-application process to confirm your project is eligible before you invest a lot of time in an application. Our funding amounts range from $2,500 to $15,000. There are also special circumstances where we can go above $15,000 for regional projects that are cross-county or make big regional goals happen in special circumstances. Eligible organizations include 501c3 nonprofits. You must register with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Charitable Contributions, and have a BOC number. I can help explain that process to you. We're also eligible for municipalities, counties, authorities, and academic institutions. Projects must occur within Cumberland, Adams, Franklin, or York County. Those are the 4 counties of the South Mountain region. We also do have a scoring benefit for projects that are occurring in the core South Mountain region. I'm just going to toggle back here to this slide that shows our core region, and this is also linked in our grant packet for you to zoom closer in on. It doesn't mean that projects outside of this core region are not eligible. It just means that there is a scoring benefit. And so a really strong project that's outside of the boundary may still be funded. Pre-applications are due April 30th, which is just about 29 days from the date of this recording. And these pre-applications are very straightforward. So please don't let that be a barrier to your applying. The purpose of our pre-application is to confirm that your project is eligible and meets our funding requirements. It's not a judged process. It's just are you eligible or are you not? And then from there, we move into a final application that will be due at the end of June 2026. We'll make our grant award decisions in August, and we will celebrate your projects at our Power of the Partnership in October. Again, here's just another visual of our general grant process. We advertise after we receive our funding from DCNR. You apply, there's a 2-step application, the pre-application and the final application. The other benefit of this process is that there is additional opportunities for us to work together and for me to provide any support and feedback to your project between the 2 phases. So projects that are invited to apply also have an opportunity to meet with me to discuss and strengthen their application. We convene a third-party review committee to review your applications, including all sorts of community representatives, DCNR, and those folks score and then meet to discuss the applications and select recipients of our funding. We'll then work to contract with you relatively quickly, and you can begin your project. And then the following year, you will close out your project with closeout financial documents as well as a success story. Now you might be thinking, what can I do to make my project more competitive? Because these grants are a competitive grant program, and we have received more than we can fund year over year in this program. So here are some just quick tips before we get into some of my more specific recommendations. Answer your questions as directly and clearly as possible. This is going to be easier than ever with our new application questions that are more direct, but just consider trying to get to the heart of your matter as soon as possible and avoid fluff wherever you can. Consider attaching pictures or rudimentary site drawings to explain your idea. These do not have to be professional. Our folks understand that many times we're funding projects that are volunteer-based or are still in an idea generation stage, but it's just helpful to understand where or what your project might look like. So really basic site drawings written in crayon and scanned in could be amazing. So consider adding some of those visual representations to help your project come to life for our review committee. Also, be realistic about timelines and deliverables. As you're preparing a grant, it's easy to want to shoot for the stars. And we do want to support your big, audacious goals, but at the same time, consider what you know you can do within the timeline because you are committing to doing this project and finishing it in that little bit more than a year timeline. And if your project doesn't seem possible within that timeline, that's something that reviewers might flag. Here's a couple more tips that I'm going to tie to examples of projects that we funded in the last couple years. So projects should promote as many of our landscape resources as possible. A great project can only respond to one or two of these, but when they combine, we call it a nexus project. So projects that respond to multiple landscape resource types can be more competitive. So for example, I wanted to highlight the preservation plan for the reefs of Heishman's Mill. This project happened in Cumberland County, and this is a historic mill, so it's clearly filling our cultural resource. However, they were able to talk about how this historic mill was not just a cultural resource, but it also served the agricultural community around the site. It's beside a stream that has a lot of natural assets, a fish ladder, and important waterway. And that waterway also happens to be part of a water trail for kayakers, so it also has a recreational benefit. So just figuring out how those things work together can really help your project. We're also considering economic resources here. So talk about how your project could help build up the agritourism economy as you're considering your project. We also want to make sure that you are aligning your work with our goals with the state of the region. These questions have changed for those of you who've applied in the past. We'll be asking 2 questions in our final application about our state of the region. One question we'll be asking you to look into our report card. The report card checks out a variety of metrics that give a health, sort of an assessment of the health of our region. For example, how many miles of stream are currently impaired. And so we'll be asking you which metrics from the state of the region could be improved by your project. If you're doing a stream restoration project, that stream impairment might be something to bring up. We're also going to be asking you what regional challenges does this project address. This will be a checklist. And the regional challenges were something that the research of our state of the region revealed. These are the things that are pressures on the South Mountain region that are affecting our metrics. So those are sustainable development, water quality and quantity, loss of resources, public health, and recreation. To highlight a project that addressed our goals with State of the Region well, in 2024, we funded the West Shore Gateway Trail feasibility study. This was an opportunity to connect the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail with Lemoyne, or at least in early planning stages. And so this project not only increased public health, but it also increased recreation. And we know that the Cumberland Valley Rail Trail is an important trail gap that the region is focusing on. Here's where I promise we get deep into the financials. This is an important thing to consider as you're building out your final project. What costs are eligible? How do you add your costs together? And how do you talk about your project? So what's eligible for our grant to fund? We can fund professional services, in-house professional services, like from the cost of your organization, and direct costs. These eligible costs are something that we can talk further about. We have some opportunity to purchase supplies for your project, but it is dependent on if they are absolutely necessary for your project, and we have a cost policy that we can talk more about that. But in general, our project's costs fall into these 3 categories: professional services, in-house services, and direct costs. Now, your costs that your project requests include have to be matched. Applicants have to match 25% of the grant request. So in my little blue arrow, we have our formula. The grant request plus the match is your total project cost. So how you would work out your formula is if you know that you're going to be asking us for $10,000, you would have to match at a minimum of that $2,500, and that would make your total project cost $12,500. For that match, there's a lot of flexible sources that you can use for that match. This could be cash funds from your organization or other grants that you're matching us to, volunteer time, donated costs, and donated professional services. I'm also happy to further talk about this with anybody who wants to get into the nitty-gritty on their budget, but these are just sort of the general ideas of what costs you can have funded and how to match them. My final tip is planning for partnership. The South Mountain Partnership, you know it, it's in our name. Partnership is very important to us, and we want to see your project bring in diverse partners and be done in concert with your community. A project that I want to highlight from 2023 that did a great job of this is preserving the historic places that matter in the South Mountain region. This was a series of meetings and a written guide for historic preservation in South Mountain. And what is so unique about this project is that it was a partnership between Shippensburg University, the Cumberland County Planning Office, the State Historic Preservation Office, the Cumberland County Historical Society, as well as us as funders. So that was a really big breadth of local, state, and nonprofit educational institution. All of those groups came together to do this project, and it just really made the impact of this project strong and helped it score well as a project for us to fund. So always think, who can you bring into your work and who would benefit from your project and how could you maybe get them involved? If this sounds good to you and you're ready to apply, I'm glad to hear it. The first thing you want to do is review our grant packet. It has all the information that I talked about today in greater detail. And then there's a brief pre-application to submit by April 30th. If you are considering applying, please do not miss this deadline. If you miss the April 30th, there is no opportunity to get back in to our mini grant pipeline. So please do submit your brief pre-application by April 30th. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk about your individual project. I've scheduled some office hours, and we'll be posting a link for that in the chat and in the description of this video. Or you feel free to email or call me outside of those scheduled windows. Thank you so much for spending some of your morning or afternoon with me talking about our grant program. I'm excited about your application to our updated 2026 grant program, and I hope that these changes will make the process easier, make this grant more accessible, and have a greater impact in the region. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.